Checking in with The Biggest Bluff by Kornikova. Marissa? I have no idea. Kornikova, a 2020 nonfiction book. The Biggest Bluff, How I Learned to Pay Attention, Master Myself, and Win, is going to be apparently the story of a this young woman who is got a PhD in psychology and kind of growing work, I guess, in kind of human behavior, who decided that she was going to a over a year period, kind of for the pitch of her book, um, master the game of poker. Um, Coming from a place of absolutely knowing nothing about poker as a player, but someone who is fascinated by how people make decisions, um, and that that for the most part people do not use probability. They use hunches. They use emotion as a way of making life decisions, and that makes them oftentimes quite wrong. So she hooks up with a couple of guys who are master poker players. I think they've both been world poker champions. Won $1 million at a tournament, and so far it's very much a book that's much more about um, kind of wisdom of kind of like how to make decisions, how to learn that people who win, um, actually you're too high on that you don't actually kind of stop and assess, like, well, what actually contributed to this, but that actually if you can actually lose and not blame everyone else for it, but actually stop and kind of reflect on, okay, what decisions should I make, how could I have played it differently, stuff like that, would actually do a much better job at it. And indeed, they saying that that's the kind of player of poker who actually can thrive is the person who can put on the brakes and assess, and not just play conservatively, but just like, go, okay, what do I need to do? Think about it, assess, and do it without ego. Of not like, how, it can't be me. It's not me. It's like, I'm the greatest player ever. It's like, no, okay, look, doesn't care about that. Life doesn't care about that. There's a section in here just about talking about, life isn't fair. Life just sort of is. There's actually something, when she's dealing with her grandmother, who's got a lot of disapproval of, like, it's like playing poker is a bad thing. It's like morally bad. It's something that you should be looked down on. Even though when you look at other people who are gambling, say people who are working in the stock market, um, oftentimes they're not actually that great, very good at gamblers. They lose a hell of a lot, but somehow this is seen as a more acceptable profession than being a poker player, which, I think you could say about either one of them, that it's kind of, but also saying that, like, yeah, it seems to weed out, like, the higher the stakes of the game are, the more professional the players, the better they are at assessing odds and playing cards, and you're not going to get great hands all the time, and that's not necessarily determines who wins. Oftentimes, I think they're saying like 23% of the time, the people winning have good hands, but the other part of the things, like, people don't. Don't quote me on numbers because I'm shitty at numbers, which is one of the reasons I would definitely stay away from poker. Um, but and just people get very sure on things without very much information, or with, like, not great odds. Um, she points out that people were shocked and kind of ganged up on all the pollsters when they failed to predict that Donald Trump was going to win. No one so much so than Nate Silver, whose podcast I listen to, 528, I think is what it's called. Is it 528? I can't remember. But It's like, well, look at what he actually said. He said that Clinton had a 73% chance of winning, but that Donald Trump had a 27% chance of winning. So it's like, that wasn't 100% for sure that Hillary Clinton was going to win. And indeed it wasn't. There was a chance, and that chance came in the probability that it would come in. But people have trouble thinking in the terms of probability. It's basically just 100% lock did it. And that if you actually start if you actually started living your life like that, like, well, are you 100% sure on that? Like, would you bet money on like what you just said? People would be a lot less, might be a lot less kind of sure of themselves, be a lot less like, oh, I 100% believe in something, or I 100% know this for a fact. And indeed, when she's talking to her her poker gurus, people are like, oh, do they have like wisdom of like, how you should play this hand, how you should play that, and it's like, you know, actually no, the guy who's like been doing this forever, like freakishly long in a game which is apparently a young man's game, young person's game, for little men seem to be a thing and big part of it. It's like, it's like less certainty, more kind of just being open to, you know, more thinking. You know, you should keep an open mind. You should always be questioning. Less certainty, more questioning. You should always have an open mind, kind of be questioning stuff. Um, she talks about like, she noticed he was eating an egg white omelet. It's like, that doesn't taste very good, does it? It's like, so it's fine, it's fine. And so she said, like, look, you're doing it because of nutrition stuff. And then she pulled out all these studies that, you know, apparently are now saying that, like, the whole thing of just eating the egg white versus eating, the full egg, it's not that much of a, it's not really giving you that health benefit that they say it's supposed to. And he listened, and he kind of read some of the stuff and things like that. And she noticed that the next time he had an omelet, he had a full egg omelet. Um, but that like someone was it, she quoted Nora Ephron saying, like, she had berated people about this for all this time, but no one actually stops and listens. They always just get kind of very upset that you've dared to kind of question their diet because they've made a decision, so they don't want to change that decision, which is very much a human nature thing. Um, and she was talking about flipping coins and, like, having a behavioral thing where in one group they randomized the coin outcomes. Another one, they made it so that the person would guess it all the time right, or they would guess it wrong. And they asked them a series of questions about, like, well, do you think you could get better at guessing the coin toss? Do you think, you could, with practice, you could do stuff? And the answer should be just probability. It's a flip of a coin. It's like, no, I couldn't. But if people really were getting it right all the time, they thought, oh, I think I really am good at this. And yeah, I think I can get even better at it. It's like that kind of effect. What kind of winning has an effect on people? The idea that if you're an instant success, that's actually bad for you because you haven't been able to kind of test your thinking. You haven't, like, if you wrote the great American novel first time out, well, then you haven't had all the failures that you actually need to have to kind of test, oh, maybe I should do this right or that right. It's like it can kind of ruin you as whatever thing you're going into if you immediately are a success because you don't get that forging. And it's not hazing as much as it's testing your thinking, which is, and also just sort of realizing that there's so much kind of random chance in stuff that you need to not get a giant ego thinking you're the greatest thing ever. It's like, no, there's chance in this. And I wonder if this is a thing about religion, is that there's a thing about poker, which is it's games of chance are all about the randomness of the universe, whereas religion is all about, no, there's a teleological um, mover who is determining things, and that there isn't random chance, and that kind of gambling and stuff like that is kind of a direct challenge to that, or direct evidence of like, people gamble, they know that it's like, no, it's just how the cards flip. Isn't because God's on my side or I'm a good or bad person. It just is. So yeah, yeah. I was worried that this was going to be kind of bro dude kind of poker book, even if it's written by a woman, because hey, I'm not sexist. Some women can be bro dudes as well. Um, I guess we'll see as it goes along. I mean, we are getting a lot of bromides, a lot of wisdom here. Um, some of it seems kind of interesting. Um, there is very much I kind of the whole thing of kind of individual luck. Um, how does this work for being with other people, with treating other human beings decently? Um, you know, a lot of poker guys you think of as kind of selfish assholes. At least that's the kind of stereotype I think of that. And it's about beating somebody else. It's very kind of zero sum that way. So it'll be interesting to see how this book deals with that, if it does deal with that, or if it's kind of coming from a very American individualistic, you get yours kind of attitude from it. So yeah, we shall see. That's The Biggest Bluff by Konakova, Kona, Kona, Koninova. Koninova. I'll have to look it up and get it right, and probably write it down in big block letters for when I'm actually talking about it at the end. All right, more videos later.